Yes, everyone, you know what time it is. It's your boys, Jack and Maddie Hayes here. A good addition to this podcast. And it is going to be, I imagine, a very Arne Slot heavy podcast by the looks of things. Plenty is going to be spoken about with the Slot because he has a very big meeting today, or I guess his agent has a very big meeting today. And it does depend maybe on whether that agent can be able to meet the needs of the likes of Feyenoord, but also meet the needs of her client, the likes of a certain Arne Slot and his monster. But good to have you here, Maddie Hayes.
Absolutely fantastic to be here. I'm looking forward to diving into what is probably going to be Tottenham's next manager.
Looking forward to it. Dave-O, how are you keeping this morning?
Yeah, I'm good, Jacko. I'm good. Exciting times ahead. So I can't wait for the slot machine bonanza to take place.
There you go. In typical Matty Hayes fashion here, everybody, he's actually been able to provide us with not only, I think, the questions, but he's also, I imagine, going to come with lots of facts and also sort of, logic maybe around Arne Slot that we definitely haven't been able to hear before. So everybody, if you do like this edition of certain Matty Hayes, of course, hit that like button. If Arne Slot is going to be Spurs' new manager here, Matty, why do you feel like Spurs even believed in him in the first place? Why has he all of a sudden become the front runner? What makes Arne Slot so special?
Yeah, well, look, we were kind of just speaking about this a little bit off air in terms of the profile of manager that Tottenham have been looking for. And you look at that infamous managerial hunt of 2021, it was such a mix and match of different candidates, of different managers who played different ways and had different requirements in a role and everything. It was just a mess. But this time it looks as though Spurs have identified a certain type of manager and a very specific profile that they wanted to come in and try and turn this team around. And, I think not replacing Antonio Conte immediately is ultimately the reason why our season has petered out into what it's become. Fighting for Conference League against Aston Villa on the last day of the season is probably not what we expected when we broke up for the World Cup. But I think Tottenham have been willing to sacrifice the short term to be able to make sure that we're giving ourselves the proper footing to go in the long term and to actually give ourselves the time to make a decision on our next manager. And I don't think Arne Slot would have been top of that list when the search began. I do think that would have been Julian Nagelsmann, but there's a very, very clear, definitive set of traits that Tottenham have looked for in a new manager. And we've heard a lot of them kind of from the media over the last couple of months. The main one is that it was an up-and-coming, exciting young manager. Maybe Nagelsmann wasn't as up-and-coming as they wanted, which is a bit of a surprise. But we wanted someone who was new to the game, not too long in management, had new, fresh ideas that they could put in. Because I think we've seen with the last couple of managers we've appointed, excluding Nuno, because I don't count him as a manager. He was just a man who sat in a chair on the side of the pitch. With Conte and Jose, they were a bit more old-fashioned. They've been in the game a long time. People knew them very well. And while we started extremely well with both of those managers, it didn't take very long for opposition teams to figure us out. And I think that may be something that Spurs are trying to avoid this time round. Slot, he's done very well at the two clubs he's been at. He's statistically the best manager that Alkmaar had in their history. 2.11 points per game is the highest return of any manager there. And then he's gone to Feyenoord and he's done even better, lifting the Eredivisie title just a couple of weeks ago. But it's not just the fact that he has managed to do that. It's the way that he's done it, playing some really, really good football, free-flowing, fast-paced, attacking football. Scores goals for fun, which I think we certainly miss at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. And he likes giving chances to young players. I could rattle off a big list of players that he's given debuts to in his few teams. Owen Wijndal will be one of them. He's gone on to be a fantastic player for Ajax at the moment. There's Miran Boadu, who's 18 years of age, and he had over 20 goal contributions in a season under Arne Slot, because he's just happy to give these young players opportunities. And Toyn Koopmeiners, Calvin Stengs, more names that he's given the opportunity to. So I think Tottenham have taken a look at what we've been missing over the last 3 or 4 years. And we wanted to plug those gaps, and I think Arne Slot just does take a lot of those boxes. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say he's the best option. I know if Arne Slot's number one fan just below me. That's just because he's probably going to be our manager. I do have a lot of reservations about whether or not he'll be able to make that step up. But I think Spurs have just gone for a happy medium where it's a manager that ticks a lot of the boxes that we're looking for in our next candidate. He's also one who I think will appreciate the job and the opportunity that he's been given, because a lot of Spurs fans, and I'm sure people within the club as well, kind of felt with Antonio Conte especially that he felt he was doing us a favour. Even though he was getting £50 million a year to do it, I think he felt maybe a bit bigger than the job, and that he knew more than the club, which he certainly did to some extent. But
Yeah.
you're not going to be able to build a successful team if you're constantly going to think that you're better than everyone around you. It needs to be a team effort, and I think Slot is really going to appreciate the opportunity that he's been given. But that's not going to stop him from saying what he thinks, and having words that need to be had behind closed doors. But there's certainly a lot of boxes there that he ticks, and I think Tottenham have gone the right way about this managerial search.
Interesting. Anything that maybe Maddie said there, Dave, that you kind of want to pick out with to get started as well?
For me, when I look at the managerial list, I agree with Matty. I don't think Arne Slot was number one on the list. Look, I don't believe Pochettino was ever on the list. They're never going to bring him back as long as this current ownership is here, because it makes everything look like what they've done over the last 4 years. The money that they've wasted on staff transfer managers, it undermines their position at Tottenham Hotspur. So they're never going to bring him back. They've missed the boat with Nagelsmann because they didn't get a director of football. Now, when you look at the next guys on the list, you look at Postecoglou, doesn't exactly work with a lot of youngsters. You look at some of the players he's brought to Celtic, not exactly a lot of youngsters. You look at Amarim at Sporting, it's going to cost 30 million to buy him out of his contract. That's the fee. And Spurs aren't going to put half of what you presume is probably going to be a transfer budget on a manager. So that sort of brings you down to Arne Slot. He's cheaper to get out of Feyenoord, but, I think they've also looked at it. The guy loves working with youngsters. When you look at Tottenham and you look at a lot of Paratici's recruitment, it's been 25 or under. You look at a lot of the youngsters that we've got out on loan or that we haven't been able to get into the first team, and Tottenham look like they don't want to sell them. That's why they keep sending them out on loan. So someone like Arne Slot, I think they've identified to sort of come in and work with these guys without Tottenham actually having to break the bank. Because when you look at Jose and Conte, they demand 60, 70, 80 million pound players, first in class in every position that they're looking for. Arne Slot will not need that, So for me, I can understand how Arne Slot has become front runner. Now, me personally, look, he wasn't my first, second, or even third choice, or even fourth choice for the job. I would say personally he was my fifth choice. But, I can see exactly what he's going to bring to Tottenham. It does excite me. I expect to see the end of certain older individuals who no longer have the game for Tottenham. And I expect to see a young, hungry team on the front foot playing attractive football, scoring a lot of goals. And, I think Arne Slot will bring exactly what the fans have sort of been looking for since Conte has been sacked, what a lot of fans have asked for. So there is a lot of benefits to Slot coming in here. And my biggest thing is at least there seems to be a bit of a plan with Slot coming in here. Mm-hmm. With Conte coming in here, with Jose Mourinho coming in here, sometimes you're looking at a bit of the recruitment that we've done underneath them. You're like, these guys wouldn't sign these players at any other club they've been at. Whereas with Arne Slot coming in, Spurs, because of the way our business model is and the business model that comes from Joe Lewis, which is, self-sustainable, operate within your means. Arne Slot is a guy that will do that. And for me, I feel like the club should actually back this guy more than what they have done other managers, because it's not going to cost them as much.
No, certainly not. And also he ultimately does come in with less of the status and, drama that maybe previous managers have come in with as well. But also I think being a manager who's actually had a pretty short career, but while having a short career, what I've said about Arne Slot is that you're only as experienced as you are experienced in anything in life. Like if you're 23 years old, like when they say you have to have 10 years of service, it'd be, like impossible. You're only 23. And I think it's the case with Slot. He's only been a manager for around a few years, but in that space of a few years, he's actually practically done almost as well as anyone could do in that space of time. And I think maybe that's what's also interested the likes of Spurs, is that he's basically just only gotten done better and better and better since his time. And the fact that he's also challenged, I think, for trophies also as well, so quickly kind of into his managerial career. Often you see kind of managers who maybe just get started out. Maybe they'll kind of, please you with a lot of, kind of attractive football, but they don't often, really push really for the trophies always right away. But the fact that I think Slot has made such huge strides, I think, right away in the trophy hunt. And let's be honest, it's not like he's won the league with Ajax. It's not like he's won the league with PSV. These are two teams that he's actually challenged for the leagues with that are actually, I believe, only in the last decade or so have only won the, like, what is it? Feyenoord have won the league twice in the last, last century or whatever it's been in the 21st century. And then the AZ Alkmaar you could consider as being like what, the fourth or fifth, kind of bigger, side, and maybe the likes of the Eredivisie as well, who really do not punch at the same weight at the likes of Ajax or PSV. So for him to actually practically be competing with Ten Hag, and that's what's funny. When he was at Alkmaar, he was competing with Ten Hag for that league title at the time, and the fact that he did that, I think, is impressive alone. I'm sad that COVID actually interrupted that for him, because that could have been probably, I imagine, if it was a normal season, we would have been talking about that towards the end of the season as somebody who was really making strides, but he didn't get that opportunity. And then when it comes to Feyenoord, the fact that he was able to sort of replicate that with a different team and also challenge for trophies with a different team, but not an Ajax or a PSV, is also, I think, very impressive. And last thing I'll say too, and Maddie, I'm curious what you think about this, is that people have said what manager actually wants to come to Spurs. And maybe one of the other big part was Arne Slot seems like he'd be happy to get his hands dirty and be happy to work with what is a very difficult Tottenham Hotspur.
Yeah, Tottenham, I think for so long, the Spurs managerial job has been threatening to become something of a poison chalice. With everything that happened with Pochettino, you're looking at a man who was given the minimal tools to do the job, and he overperformed and exceeded expectations to a level that I don't think anyone would have been able to predict. And at the first sign of trouble, he was caught. And then you see managers like Jose Mourinho and Antonio Conte come in who win everywhere they've been. Jose could be about to win his second European trophy with Roma, having left Spurs. Nuno Espirito Santo, he's top of the Saudi professional league. He's 6 points clear over there. It's just a thing that Spurs managers win trophies at other clubs. So coming in to take the Spurs job, it kind of feels like everything is against you. It's very, very difficult to succeed depending on what your definition of success in this current role is. But for Slot, he's someone who I think I would compare his career trajectory something very similar to Erling Haaland, in that he's progressing his career step by step. Haaland was at Molde, he was getting offers from all over Europe. He went to Salzburg, which a move that not many people would have predicted. Then at Salzburg, he's scoring hat-tricks for fun in the Champions League, getting offers from everywhere. He goes to Borussia Dortmund, and he's just taking it step by step. And Slot is doing something very similar, which could be something of a concern, which I'm sure we'll speak about later. But he's taken what he sees to be the next natural progression in his career. And when someone is taking these steps as measured as he is, he sees something that Tottenham can offer to him. He sees the benefit of coming and taking this job. And yes, he's coming into a club that is in disarray from board level down to playing level. At every level, there is an element of disarray in that Spurs squad. But he did go into something similar at Feyenoord. Dick Advocaat, who was the manager of Feyenoord before Slot came in, I think before it was announced that he was leaving, he was on like a 17-game unbeaten run. They were doing absolutely fantastically. Things kind of petered out towards the end of the season, but even he had said that the setup at Feyenoord and the way things are being run, it was impossible to compete with PSV and Ajax. And there was talk of their stadium, this historical stadium called De Kuip. There was talk of that being knocked down and going to a new soulless ground. Does that sound familiar? And there was just a lot of unhappiness, I suppose, within the club. And he came in and he fixed it. And they're Eredivisie champions, and they're in one of the best positions they've been in for so long. Like you mentioned, that the only other time this century they've won the Eredivisie title was in 2017. So he's someone who has experience in fixing broken clubs, I suppose, and I'm sure he's up to the challenge as well. He's looking forward to the challenge and wants to see exactly what he can achieve. Like you're saying about the experience, I think there is something of a concern that he's only managed in the Eredivisie. That's actually another interesting sort of trait of some of the managers that Spurs have looked at. There's Slot, who's only managed in Holland. In the Netherlands, there's Nagelsmann, who's only managed in Germany. Amorim, who's only managed in Portugal. For me, it's a little bit odd, I suppose, that we're looking for managers with such limited experience in terms of the amount of football that they've experienced and the different types of football they've experienced. But everywhere Slot has been, he's done well, and we're just hoping now that he can make that step up.
And a lack of experience comes with a young manager too. Like that's what young managers have. Sorry, Dave. Yeah.
No, the thing is, the reason why we're going for someone like an Arne Slot with that level of experience is because, we can't go after top managers anymore. We've already been through 3 of the best 5 managers in the world: Pochettino, Jose Mourinho, and Conte. You've got nowhere to turn to, and that's just the reality of it. So this is where we're at. I've always pre-warned since the Jose Mourinho days that this isn't going to happen, and this is where eventually you're going to end up leading to. we're here. However, what I will say is, I think Arne Slot has a better chance of succeeding than a Jose Mourinho, than an Antonio Conte does, because, this guy comes in straight away. There's a clean slate there for him. His captain is going to be gone this summer. So he has a chance of changing that leadership without upsetting anybody. Fans are at their end of their tether with a Dyer, with a Sanchez and Davies and people like that. They no longer want to see them. And, some of their contracts are up. So it looks like they're probably on their way out the door as well. So players that have held this club back in the past are on their way out the door, but also with some of the recruitment we've done under Paratici, there's a lot more for Arne Slot to work there with from the off than what there was for a Jose Mourinho or an Antonio Conte.
I really like this question here, and I think this is one of the big ones that we actually have to ask of Slot, because free-flowing football can be nice, but he's going into a mess, and he's going into what is a difficult job. I mean, Matty even alluded to something earlier. He walked into, a soulless stadium, or labeled a soulless stadium, was able to turn things around. There's a lot of sort of similar things that Slot's going to have to do again. It's not going to be an easy undertaking, the likes of Spurs, but Matty, Tottenham need more than a manager right now. We desperately need someone who can change the culture, unite the fans, the squad, the owners, maybe somehow, and someone who can actually restore the values and those standards that Harry Kane believes have actually been lost since the sacking of Pochettino. Can Arne Slot undertake all of those things at once?
I think the biggest challenge that Slot will have with this is status. And it's definitely a criticism of the Tottenham dressing room that could come into play. But I worry there are some players in that dressing room who, depending on who comes back from loan and whoever we sign and whoever we sell, of course, but I feel like there are a few players in that dressing room who might say, well, I mean, you're just Arne Slot. We've just had Antonio Conte, we've just had Jose Mourinho, we could have had Julian Nagelsmann. I feel like there will be something about like that within the dressing room, but I also feel as though Slot is the type of manager who won't be afraid to make a statement. And if, you look at what Eric Ten Hag did when he went into Manchester United, and you'd Cristiano Ronaldo throwing up fusses all the time, just causing problems all over the place. Ten Hag dealt with that in a way that I don't think many managers would have been able to. And then he said to one of the best footballers of all time, off you go. I don't care. Get out of here. And I think Arne Slot is a man who will be able to make a similar statement. And looking at and hearing, especially from players, how he's got on side with his players at other clubs, he seems like the type of manager who is happy to be that kind of friendly, be the Mauricio Pochettino almost, be that friendly guy who's able to help them through the difficult periods. But he also has that mean streak in him where he's not going to take any crap. He's not going to allow players to take advantage. He's not going to allow players to take the foot off the gas in training because they have their starting spot at the weekend anyway. And it's that balance that I think will get a lot of respect from the players. And from that point, then it's just what level of support he gets from the board, because, like we mentioned there, Feyenoord, he clearly has the ability and he has the know-how to change that culture and to change the mentality within a team to be more successful. But he needs full power to be able to do that, and that's what he has at Feyenoord. He has almost complete power over that football club with the help of some directors and some other coaches as well. He does have an incredible amount of power. He's probably not going to have that when he comes into Spurs, as much as Daniel Levy can speak about, bringing in Scott Munn as a chief football officer and Levy stepping back from the football operations. As much as he wants to say that, we all know, like what happened with Antonio Conte and Fabio Paratici, as soon as there's a sign of trouble, Daniel Levy's going to take over. He's going to be back into this micromanagement level. That is another big stumbling block that Slot has to compete with, but I'm sure that's something that will be discussed at length in the interviews that come after the meeting with Feyenoord today.
And with the track record just quickly before him, seeing all the managers that have gone before him, you would think he might get a clue as to maybe things might be a little bit difficult over there, and you might not always get what you want, and you have to be prepared for that. You would think that he might already start to see the signs. And like we said, a guy that's willing to get his hands dirty and work with a difficult club, and let's see if he can do it. But just quickly, Matty, do you feel like with Harry Kane saying, standards and values that have gone missing and those need to be kind of restored, can he in some way do one of those? I mean, is that something that he can do via, just style of play, or is that kind of some other things as well, do you think?
It's definitely more than a style of play. I think that is a big part of it, and again, Spurs fans will be the first to say that the way we played football over the last 4 years is quite frankly an embarrassment. You know, it's not Tottenham. That team that we've seen on the pitch wearing the white jersey over the last 4 years is not what we would associate with Tottenham. And I do think that there has been some sort of concession from Daniel Levy and from the board with disappointment in the way that we're going, because he made the appointments of Jose and Conte very clearly with just trying to get a shortcut to become a big team, trying to get a shortcut to being successful, and hoping that someone like Jose or Conte could come in and win a trophy, and that itself would then change the culture and change the mentality of the club. Because, you know, when you get that first trophy, you have that hunger for the second and third and the fourth again. That's not how it works. You know, if that's the way that it worked, every club will be appointing a manager like that every 5 minutes. Tottenham don't have any sort of platform to be able to get a manager in like that, win straight away, and then change everything. What you need to do, first of all, is change the philosophy and change the culture. And I think that's the direction the club are trying to go now with the appointment of Slot. And again, like you said, his track record is there for that. You know, AZ Alkmaar, they've only won the league twice in their history. You know, the last time they did was in 2009, and he has them, you would argue, probably going to win the Eredivisie title in 2020 if the season hadn't been cancelled. You know, they were level on points with Ajax. They'd just beaten them in the Cruyff Arena a couple of weeks before the season was cancelled. They were well on their way to winning that league title, and that's not an easy thing to do. I mean, you look at leagues like Germany, where Nagelsmann has been with Bayern Munich dominating there. Amorim in Portugal has been Benfica and Sporting and Porto. Scotland is always Celtic or Rangers. It's the same in the Netherlands, where it's always been PSV and Ajax. A step down is Feyenoord, and then another step down is everywhere else. Good and point. He managed to bring Alkmaar to that on the brink of a title if it hadn't been for the pandemic. So it's not an easy thing to go into a side who I seemingly were happy being that team who might qualify for the Europa League, might get in the Conference League, just being the best of the rest in the Netherlands, and had been for so long. And he comes in and he's able to change everything in his first season. It completely transformed what that club was about, and clearly the mentality in the dressing room as well. But again, it's just the question, how will he be able to make that step up? Because it's a much more difficult job, and it's a much more stressful job, much more high pressure. There's much more eyes on you when you're trying to do that at Spurs. And again, you'll have that stumbling blocks of the egos in the dressing room who mightn't believe you're able to do it. But you can only judge him on what he's done. I don't think you can't judge him on what he hasn't done. Everything he has done, he's done well. So hopefully he can continue that trend.
Just to maybe touch on what you're saying about status coming in, and does he have the status to change the culture? For me, I think he can be very clever with what he does. You know, you look at Pochettino. Pochettino walked into Tottenham. He got rid of some old players that have been there for far too long, just collected wages. And he got rid of them, and he sort of formed young, hungry players. Like, he had no problem bringing through Harry Kane, letting him play, and ditching Adebayor to the bench. You know, Holtby, Sigurdsson, people like that, they all started seeing their way out of the team. You start seeing the likes of Bentaleb and people like that from the academy coming through and playing in positions and stuff like that. And what that done then with Pochettino, when he done that, it sends out a message. It's like, you work hard if you want to play. If you don't, you'll suffer the same fate as these guys, and that's it at the end of the day. So I think that's what Arne Slot has to do when he comes into Tottenham. He's got to look at that leadership group. He's got to decimate it at least by half. You know, he's got to take it out by half. He's got to look at the leadership of the squad. He's got to get rid of some of them big characters that maybe don't match that on the field in terms of performances. Get rid of them, gone. All of a sudden, that sends out a signal to everybody else in that squad, maybe bar Harry Kane, maybe bar Sonny, that you do what I tell you to do here. But the thing is, when I say bar Harry Kane and Sonny, because for me, they're going to fall in line anyway. They have done under every single manager, so I don't think there'll be a problem. I don't think they'll oppose what he's trying to do here, because you hear the way Harry Kane talks in his latest interviews. You know, he's fed up with what's going on. He wants people that are here to do the right thing, that are here to play football, that are here to win. So that's the first thing Arne Slot needs to do for me, is identify characters that have too big of a say in the dressing room, that don't match it on the pitch in performances. You get them gone, that already gives you a bit of respect. But the second thing he has to do is speak to Daniel Levy and say, look, if I make a decision on a guy, what we can't have any longer is them coming into me, asking me why I'm not playing. I give them the reasons, they don't like it, and they run to you. Because straight away that undermines my position. What power then do I have to these players? And what chance do I have for them to actually go out, intensely press like I need them to do, if they feel like they could just undermine me and go straight to you, because then they're not going to do what I ask them to do. And that's why you see what you see on the football pitch nowadays. You got to remember, these players are massive amounts of money. They've got huge egos. They all clamor together and they start getting managers sacked, this, that, and the other. You know, who was it? Who's the guy at Palace? What's his name? Roy Hodgson said the other day, you know, you alienate one player. You're not only alienating him, you're alienating the clique that he has in that dressing room. And it starts causing you problems and stuff like that. You know, that's the way modern football is going. So for me, you know, it's got to be, he's got to beg Daniel Levy that cannot happen anymore.
Yeah.
The buck stops with me. If he's not playing, that's it. No more crying to Daniel, you know, and then I'm going to suffer and get sacked, because that's what you're seeing on the football pitch. You've got players who don't want to work. Even if people have a problem with the style of play of Antonio Conte and Jose Mourinho, what we should have a problem with, fans, is then both managers have come out and said, I'm not asking my team to sit that deep. So why are they going against what the managers are instructing them to do on the football pitch? Because they know they can, because they know they have the power to be able to get them sacked. So that's where our biggest problem is at Tottenham Hotspur, and that's where Arne Slot has to come in there. First two things he has to do, like I said, he's already got a clean sheet with captaincy. He can sort of come in and pick who he wants. So if he gets that right as well, so for instance, if he comes in and picks up a Harry Kane, I'm not saying he will be captain or should be captain, but if he does, you know, it'd be a good player to pick from, because then you're thinking, you know, he's got everyone around the squad sort of likes him. He's got the squad on board, and he's got my back and stuff like that. But, you know, the first thing Arne Slot has to do if he wants to be able to make a statement is establish that power structure. No more players going from the squad to Daniel. What it should be is from the squad to the captain goes to the manager. The manager can't sort, he goes up to the guy like maybe DOF or Scott Munn. And then if it's a real big issue, then it should go to Levy. It shouldn't be that a player can just go from there straight to Daniel Levy. So if Arne Slot gets that sorted out, a bit like what Pochettino done when he first arrived, he has a major chance of making this a success. Because I do feel we're at that point. Because when Pochettino arrived here, he had a lot of players who were on big wages, lost their love for maybe the game at Tottenham Hotspur, etc. So Pochettino saw that. Also with the training and how fit they had to be, he realized he needed younger, hungrier players that wanted to meet them demands that he expected of them. And Arne Slot does have this opportunity at Tottenham, providing he can also get rid of some of that old guard that are holding this club back, that are just not good enough to be here. Lloris, Davies, Dyer, Sanchez, Sessegnon, people that have had multiple chances, even against crap teams that have let us down and embarrassed us. Get them gone as well. Then you're left with a lot of 25-year-olds who are impressionable, that will do what you ask them to do, that will meet them running stats, that won't complain about getting fit, that won't complain about pressing. So that's the biggest thing for me that Arne Slot needs to do.
That's a fabulous answer when it comes to uniting the squad. That was one of the things we said they need to do: unite the squad, get the squad back on the same page. I'm not sure what you were about to say, Maddie, but another thing he needs to do is unite the fan base, right? And how can he do that? That's another thing he has to look at. But what were you about to say, Maddie? Sorry.
Yeah, there was just two brilliant points there that David made that I just wanted to build on. The first one being about the captain. You know, I mentioned like Ten Hag made a statement at Man United. You know, Slot has different opportunities to come in and make a statement at Spurs, and where he puts the captaincy is one of them. Because there are some managers who might come into Spurs and their first meeting might be with Harry Kane, and Kane says, I want to go to Man United. And there are some managers who might say, okay, well, if you stay, I'll give you the captain's armband. I don't think Slot is going to be that man. I think if Slot does choose our next captain, we could be surprised, because the captain at Feyenoord at the moment, they had Jens Toornstra was their captain last season, and he left over the summer, and Slot was left with a squad, a very, very young squad. There's only 3 players over the age of 28 in that squad, a very difficult decision, and he gave it to Orkun Kukcu, who was 21 years of age, you know, a product of the Feyenoord Academy, and all of a sudden he has the captain's armband on his arm. So there could be a surprising decision coming with that, but also what you said, David, about the young players and being impressionable. I think we're going to go in a bit more depth on his development of youth players a little bit later, but that is actually something that Slot has said himself about why he likes playing with young players, and it's essentially, he said, if you have a young group, then as a trainer, you can take the boys through videos in your desired playing style. So if you have this team of experienced, egotistical, older footballers, they have the way they play. They are the players that they are. Whereas if you have that younger group, you can mold them into what you want them to become. And I think that's why Slot has thrived so much with younger players coming into his team and been able to be successful with them.
Absolutely. And I just wanted to also touch on the fact that he does need to, I think, because he has so many things he has to undertake. He has to, unite the squad. He has to bring the style of play that Spurs fans have been wanting. He has to restore those values and standards that Harry Kane has been wanting, that he's been missing since Pochettino. But uniting the fan base, I'm curious as to how he does that, because can he do that through style of play alone? Potentially he wins over a large majority of the fan base with that. But we've also seen in the past, though, that it is also about winning games, and it is also about being able to continue to challenge, and continue to punch above your weight. Will Spurs fans this time around tolerate maybe, ups and downs? Will they maybe go through a roller coaster ride with the manager? Because we struggled to do that in the past. We have kind of questioned resumes, we've questioned pedigrees, and for right reasons or wrong reasons, we have basically not been giving, I think, managers enough sort of benefit of the doubt or enough sort of kind of trust from ourselves. And it's interesting to see maybe whether Arne Slot can win us over with style of play. I think that will go a huge way in us maybe trusting him, because that was probably part of the reason why people didn't trust previous managers, was also because when things were slipping in terms of results, they felt like style of play never really pleased them in the first place. So then they could really go after the guy. But with Arne Slot, if he can win us over with style of play, he might have fewer doubters. But let's say a few games slip here and there, let's say some results don't exactly go our way, will we all of a sudden kind of be going after him? I'm curious to see if that's the case, but I really do hope not, knowing that this is going to be a difficult job for him. He has already so many other things when it comes to, kind of on his plate this season, like we said before. And so we need to give, a guy a chance with the fact that he's not going to be able to be batting 1,000, I think, with every single, moment. And he's also, again, like we brought up, a young manager is also going to make mistakes, and a young manager is also going to be able to learn on the go. And from what we can tell, Arne Slot pretty good at learning on the go thus far. He's doing more than a good job with how he's been able to make a career thus far. But I am curious to see whether, the fan base can be won over by his results, but also his style of play and maybe his demeanor too, because I'm curious if maybe we want a more reserved manager, or if he's maybe that sparky, charismatic, energetic manager too, that also can win fans over. I think that can also unite the fan base.
I think for me, Jacko, it's easy. We haven't seen a manager smile in the dugout for what, 4 years? He's just got to come into press conferences, sit there, show a smile on his face.
Put on the teeth whitener.
But come in and say the right things. I want to get back to what Tottenham are good at. I want to get back to playing football. I want to get back to playing attacking football. I want to get back to scoring goals. I want to tighten that defense. But, I think you can also take a leaf out of sort of like what Jurgen Klopp has done at Liverpool, Matty. I don't know if you remember, they lost to West Brom, I think it was 3-2, and the fans and Klopp and the players are there together in arms doing that to the fans, thanking them for their support and stuff like that. And for me, I think that's what someone like Arne Slot needs to do if he wants to get the fans back connected with this squad and back on side. That's something he has to do. Too many times you're seeing the same individuals going around clapping the fans while everyone else fucks off down the tunnel. That can't happen anymore. Arne Slot needs to set a precedent, and it's like fans and players are in this together. The fans support you, so the least you can do is go and thank them all as a collective at the end of the game. And I think fans will appreciate that. I think they will appreciate that and stuff like that. So there's little things like that Arne Slot can do that will be clever, that will get the fans on side. But also, I just have a feeling he's a bit of a character like an Ange Postecoglou at Celtic. Came in, people found him very uninspiring. People worried about the stature of the guy, this, that, and the other. 2 months later, it completely flipped. They loved how he spoke in the press conference. He was witty. He also came across and he knew what he was talking about. And now they absolutely adore the guy there. They want to call Scotland Australia now. They love him that much. And for me, I think Arne Slot has that sort of character. You don't get an AZ Alkmaar team to what he did with them nearly winning the league if you don't have a good, strong personality that the players can connect with. You don't win a league with Feyenoord and top Ajax if you don't have a squad that's together, that loves, and you have a good personality and everyone around the club is doing what you want to do. If he gets that playing squad to fall on side, the fans will fall on side. Trust me.
Or how quickly he's done it, right? Like, I feel like if you have a charismatic energy, if you're able to win people over quickly, a guy that's probably tactically astute takes a long time, years and years, and then he kind of has people on his sort of, side. But the fact that he's made strides so quickly in such short spaces of time with his teams do maybe suggest he could win people over in just a few sort of meetings or so. But Maddie, I mean, Eric Ten Hag was sort of, I guess, potentially denied for his lack of chemistry or his lack of charisma. Just quickly, do you think Arne Slot, maybe is a bit more of an energetic, type of guy, or a bit more of a charismatic or, kind of interesting type of fellow than maybe Eric Ten Hag was in the interviews?
Well, I start this answer by saying I think Tottenham were just wrong in their judgment of Eric Ten Hag. It's what he's done at United speaks for itself. I know maybe a bit of a blip over the last 6 to 8 weeks as they get down to the business end of the top 4 race, but ultimately they're going to finish in the top 4 with a couple of fixtures they've left and the buffer they have on Liverpool already.
And he's united the fan base, it looks like, for the most part.
Yeah, he has, and I think the way he conducts himself in press conferences and stuff does play a part in that, just as Arne Slot in the way he handled repetitive questions about his future before their game against FCM in last week. The way he handled himself in that has already endeared him to some extent to the Spurs fans, but he could come out and he could say whatever he wants in press conferences, and he could be a comedian up there and every Spurs fan love what he has to say. But if that's not backed up by what's happening on the pitch, it doesn't matter. You do need that, but he definitely does have the charisma. He has that likability factor. And I think every team falls in love with their manager when they're doing well, but I think Slot could have that kind of added bit of connection to the fans. Like he has a Feyenoord, speak to any Feyenoord fan. Of course, he's won in the league. They're going to love him, but they genuinely do adore him, almost like we did with Pochettino back when things were going well with him. Exactly. And that is important. And Slot does seem like the type of man as well who can have that relationship with the players, which is so important. As much as he is their leader, their manager, their boss, essentially, he can still be that kind of friendly face for them, which is, of course, a bit more of a modern management style, but certainly something that will be important.
Another important question, I think, though, is can he actually replicate what he's been doing stylistically, in the Eredivisie with Feyenoord, with the likes of Spurs? And he has a reputation for quick football, as well as being able to mold and build a squad in his image, Maddie. But can he deliver that entertaining football? And I also would quickly say, Bundesliga, Eredivisie, always known for, the free-flowing, fast, football, but often always isn't perfectly replicated in the Premier League. So can he do it?
If he gets backed in the market, if he gets the players that he wants, there's certainly a chance. Of course he's going to adapt. He's not going to try to play the exact same football at Spurs. I think he'll know that he'll have to switch it up a little bit. But he's so good tactically, and he's so good at improving individual players that he already is essentially known as the type of man who can bring some underdogs to compete. And as much as we might not want to say it, that is what Tottenham are now. We're complete outside underdogs. There's some players in the team that I think will suit what he wants to do. We certainly need a new goalkeeper. Whether Lloris was leaving or not, we need a ball-playing goalkeeper. David Raya, seemingly the perfect option for that. If it'll happen or not is of course another question. Or if he wants to bring Boilo with him from Feyenoord, I wouldn't be opposed to that. He needs a new left centre-back, arguably needs new full-backs. He needs a new attacking midfielder. There's a lot of work that needs to be done on that squad, but I think what we do just need to be aware of is that it is going to take time. When he went into Feyenoord, there were a lot of young players already there, and a lot of players that he brought through the academy that he was able to turn into what he wanted. But Spurs don't quite have that at the moment. Even the young players that we do have, like Brian Hill, if he stays after he returns from loan, like Dejan Kulusevski, they're young, but they've been in the game a long time, so it'll be more difficult to kind of shape them into what he wants. But I think with his ability to improve one-to-one players and his attention to detail in the way he coaches players, I don't think there's any team he could go into and not make his mark and not make them play Arne Slot type football. Because again, go back to that Feyenoord team. Like I mentioned, Dick Advocaat was their manager. Might surprise you, he's not a very possession-based manager. He's so much more old-fashioned. And they were a team who hated to have the ball, and Slot turned them into, it was like the second best possession-based team in the league behind Ajax in his first season, which has gone even further in its improvement this season. So with the players that are there at the moment, I don't think he could do what he needs to do, but give him this summer, the January window, and maybe next summer, and I think we'll fully see what an Arne Slot team looks like and how Arne Slot football is played.
Dave?
Yeah. I agree and I disagree. So let me tell you why. The reason why I sort of disagree with Matty to an extent is I think he is sort of set up for that pressing in terms of in around the forward area. I think you've got, Richarlison will work his socks off all day. I think people are sleeping on Kudo. I think he does work hard. I think if you sent him pressing, he'd have no problem doing it. My biggest one is Kane and Son. How badly did they want to press? Not quite so sure. Gil Messi. Most Spurs fans praised him for coming off the bench, putting pressure on the ball, pressing it, showing energy. So I think Gil will fit in fine. I think he'll actually use Gil. I have a sneaky suspicion he's going to move Gil inside to maybe a cam. That's my prediction on that. I think you've got Pedro Porro, people like that. I do think you've got the basis of a squad to work with to shape in his image. However, it's like any other manager. If you don't improve that backline, we cannot even start to begin to implement his image because we need players that are technically solid on the ball. And until you get that across that backline, forget about it because you're not going to be able to progress the ball into midfield or up to the forwards as much as he would like. Also, we sat here, we've questioned managers about having a plan B. He has a plan B. Are we going to buy a new number one that's quality with the ball at his feet for that plan B? And what I mean by that is if teams press his back line, he goes back to Matty Gay for great pronunciation on his name. I'm just going to call him Bijou.
What's the goalkeeper's name for Feyenoord, Matty? We want to hear the pronunciation.
I think it's Bilo.
Bilo.
Like Bergwijn, the IJ. I don't know.
Yeah.
Nice.
So, their goalkeeper Bilo, for instance, the ball would go back to him and he had the technique to be able to pin it into the forwards. And I'm not on about just ballooning it like we've seen Hugo Lloris do 60 yards up in the air, expecting Harry Kane to jump 40 feet up in the air and bloody, compete for it. This guy pings it to their chest, to their feet, where he can. He plays good balls. And for me, you have to give him that number one. So, you've got to give him the back line so he can begin to implement his plan, but also so he can implement his plan B, you also have to give him the goalkeeper. And for me, that's the most fundamental for this guy. I think even if you said, look, we can't do into the midfield and forward areas now, I think he'll be able to work with exactly what we've got in them positions. But if you don't give him defenders that are good on the ball and can defend, and you don't give him a goalkeeper who has good distribution, absolutely forget about it. People are going to say, oh, it's defensive football again. Well, I mean, when you keep giving away the ball at the rate we do, but sloppy passes, 5-yard passes that are going astray, balls going into the stand, of course you're going to be defensive football because the ball's just coming back at you every single time. And we know that's not Arne Slot's style of football. So for me, if you really want him to be able to implement it, you've got to give him the players. We know from experience that we've got players there that are just nowhere near good enough on the ball or off the ball, lapses in concentrations and everything else. So if we really want to give Arne Slot a chance, just do the business I've been asking for 4 years now.
Another thing I would add too is I'm curious to see how he does adapt to also all the various styles in the Premier League, because a thing in what I would say from experience in the Bundesliga is that almost all the teams kind of play quite similar to each other in some regard. And so it does sort of lead to this quite aesthetically pleasing football where teams are sort of, making it in a way not easy on each other, but yeah, they play a sort of similar vein of, football, and they all have a similar philosophy that in some sense has connection. Whereas you've seen, I think, just quickly an example in the Bundesliga, reason why like an Union Berlin are actually doing so well is because they could play the complete opposite of like the conventional, high pressing German system. And then that's what's actually giving them that success, is that they're playing so differently to other teams, and it's kind of causing people headaches. And I think there's a similar thing in the Eredivisie where a lot of teams do kind of play similar to each other, and a lot of teams do have a similar kind of style in some sense, and that maybe makes it, an different from the Premier League, because the Premier League, you have guys like Lopetegui who play, every man behind the ball in, certain games, and Unai Emery who just played the most bizarre high line and offside trap we've ever seen, in some time. You have to prepare for all these various different styles of play. And also you have to prepare for what is always a pretty big tactical battle between you and always a pretty decent manager. You're not always going to be coming up against a Frank Lampard every week. You're going to be coming up against a pretty good manager from time and time again. And so I'm curious to see how he handles that, where it's always a tough test in the Premier League who you come up against. Usually coming up against a guy that knows what he's doing in some sense. Even Sean Dyche knows what he's doing, as we can tell. He can cause people frustrations. He can cause people problems. And you might, look down on somebody like him, but there's a reason why he has a Premier League job. And there was a reason why he was at Burnley for as long as he was, is because he was able to frustrate some of those Pep Guardiolas, some of those Jurgen Klopps when he needed to. He was able to get the best out of his team. And I think that Arne Slot has actually proven he can play against different styles. The fact that he has been able to go so far in the Conference League shows that he was able to come up against teams that probably put every man and their mother behind the ball, and he was able to get out of there with the win. And also in the case of Jose Mourinho, I know he's come out as the loser each time, but he's given Jose a good game, and he's given Jose definitely some things to think about and has caused him problems. And we know Jose, of course, is very good at picking you apart, very good at picking out your weaknesses, etc. And he's come out as, I would say, not too shabby at the end of the day, Arne Slot, against a guy like Jose who's so experienced. So I think he will do well against different managers, but I am curious how he does that, because I'm not thinking he's going to do it right away. I think there will be moments where he gets either outsmarted or gets it wrong, and is maybe caught by surprise, because I do feel like in the Premier League, the styles are just so diverse, and that's what makes it such a hard job in the first place.
But the reason why it's been super hard this year, though, is because players don't want to move. They don't want to move out of possession, and they don't want to move in possession. How many times have you seen us on the ball and you're looking, players on the ball is looking for movement, someone to drop in to be able to receive a pass, this, that, and the other. No one wants to do it. And you're like, okay, instead of just letting them steamroll us towards our goal, how about actually going and engage the ball? And no one wants to do that. And I think that's where Arne Slot, I think that if he can get this team moving, like Pochettino did, just get them moving off the ball and on the ball, you will start steamrolling these teams that sit 11 men behind the ball. If Arne Slot had Harry Kane and Son in the Feyenoord team, he would have bet Jose Mourinho easy. He's got good quality, some of the best in class in their position at this football club. It's about filling in around that and getting people to actually move. Pochettino's team, sometimes it took us a while to break down these teams that sat everyone back, but we kept on moving, we kept on pursuing, we never gave up. And, that's Arne Slot's biggest thing that he has to come here. When he's on that sideline, no more of these rest periods where people sit back. He's got to be screaming, get up, get up, get up, chase that ball. And I think the first time someone does what he tells them not to do, he's got to haul them off and make a statement. Doesn't matter who the player is. You haul them off and you make that statement. If you're not going to be a part of this team and do what the team needs, then you're going to sit beside me. You can watch my rear end. How about that? That's what should be happening. I think that's what he's got to do. He's just got to just get these players to move. You move, you'll get the results, Jack. You just got to outwork your opponents. That's what half the battle of football is. Yes, you need technical and quality and stuff like that. But, there's no point in having all that if you don't have the work rate to match. You get both, you win games. It's that simple.
Arne Slot, Matty, he's been able to work with younger players at Feyenoord, and I actually want to maybe see what sort of research maybe you have, because I picked out a few players that I'm quite interested in that he's been able to work with in terms of younger core. But this is another section I think we definitely need to spend time on, which is the under 25 core players that Spurs have brought in over the last few years. Can he work with them, and can he be successful with them?
Yeah, that's one of the most impressive aspects of Slot's career for me, is how he's worked with young players. Or like we said earlier, he likes players that he can mold into exactly what he wants, which is a lot easier to do with younger players. Looking at the numbers, the current Feyenoord squad has an average age of 23.5 years, which is the fifth youngest in the Eredivisie. Now, Dutch football is a lot more heavily geared towards youth academies and giving players like that a chance. So the fifth youngest doesn't sound that impressive, but he is 23.5 years of age, made a Conference League final last year. I think beaten was by Juventus in the quarterfinal this season. And there's a lot of players in there that he's given debuts to at his clubs. There's Quilinci Hartman, who's the left back, Quinton Timber, who is a phenomenal central midfielder who's attracting interest from a lot of clubs all over Europe, just 21 years of age. Made his debut for Feyenoord. Santiago Jimenez as well, after losing their two top scorers from last season. He's come in, given his debut, and he's having a brilliant season. Similar at Alkmaar, he gave debut to Owen Wijndal, who's just 19, now doing well at Ajax. Is Toyn Koopmeiners, who's gone on to do well at Atlanta. Danny David, Calvin Stengs, Miran Bodu. A lot of players that he has given debuts to. Looking at the current Feyenoord squad, players who have made over 20 appearances and are under 24 years of age. There's Hartman, there's Marcus Lopez, Luciel Gertruida, Marcus Pedersen, Mats Fifer, Orkun Kukcu, the captain, Quentin Timber, Sebastian Szymanski, Igor Paschal, Santiago Jimenez, Danilo. He just loves playing young players, is what I'm trying to say. It's exactly what he wants out in that football pitch. He needs his teams to be fit, like you said, David, there earlier, in terms of being intense and constantly not giving the opponent a second to breathe. It's a lot easier to do that with younger players as well, who are more energetic, more just physically fitter. The Alkmaar team he had was that they finished second in the COVID season. They were level on points with Ajax before the season was postponed. They had an average age of 23.1 years. So it's incredibly young squads that he works with. And I think he will be excited coming into Spurs, looking at what our academies are achieving at the moment. If you just forget the under-21s who've just been relegated, you have the under-15s, the under-17s, and the under-18s who have won trophies in their respective competitions. Now, those players are probably a bit too young to come into the first team at the moment, especially in the Premier League. You probably need a few more years behind you before you can get into the first team, unless you're someone who's developed as well as Evan Ferguson had. But I think there should be excitement on both sides with Slot coming to Spurs and Spurs picking up Slot, because they're definitely players there that he can work with. Brian Hill, I think if he is going to make it at Tottenham, it will be under Arne Slot, and there's no denying he's a brilliant footballer. He hasn't really shown that at Spurs, but look at what he's done at Sevilla, what he did at Eibar before he brought him in, and even the 6 months he spent at Valencia last season. He is very, very talented. I think as a left-footed left winger who he's a bit one-dimensional in that's what he does. He plays on the left and he's left-footed, which isn't something that happens very often in the modern game. I think he might suit Slot's tactics a little bit more. Typically what the left winger would do, and I think Luis Sinisterra did it best at Feyenoord, was he'd operate a bit more narrow than left wingers usually would, to create a lot of space on the outside for the fullback who was Tyrell Malacia last season at Feyenoord as well. Whereas with Slot and a lot of his tactics, he has specific positions that need to be filled. Like, someone has to be in that left half space. There has to be someone filling in beside one of the centre midfielders if the other pushes on. He doesn't necessarily care who does that, as long as there are essentially 10 areas of the pitch he wants occupied at any time. It doesn't matter which player does it. So there could be a bit of a transition there, where maybe whatever left back we play next season, he could be the one that comes in narrow, and Brian Hill could hold that width on the left hand side. Now he might come in and sell him, but that just is a possibility. So he can find places in the team for these young players if he can see potential there, and he can see something that he can mold into the ideal person for that place in the squad. He can definitely do that. But I think what will be important as well is that we have all levels of the club playing in the same way, and that maybe Slot isn't going to be a long-term manager. Maybe he goes after 2 years or 3 years. The way that he plays football is a lot more modern. It's been compared heavily to Pep Guardiola, with the right back stepping, or the right back or left back stepping up into midfield, having a lot of men occupying the lines further forward. Even if Slot isn't the man that is there in 3 or 4 years' time, it's a style of play that is becoming more and more common. So these players will have a lot more knowledge for the next manager that comes in if he plays modern football, and the next manager again. That, on a much wider scale, is really important. Is why it's so important that we get a technical or sporting director in, so that we can have that continuity in the type of manager we have. But he's just so modern, and some of his ideas are so fresh that regardless of who our manager is down the line, these players will benefit from having worked with Arne Slot. And I've no doubt that we will see some of them starting to get opportunities in that first team. Maxim Pascazzi, the young centre back, I think he's someone who we could see a bit more next season if Slot does come in. Again, a lot of the brilliant players in our academy may be a bit too young, but there's definitely potential for opportunities down the line.
Those pronunciations of the Feyenoord players might be because it's the morning, but it gave me a stiffy, those pronunciations of the Feyenoord players. They're
probably wrong, Jack. I'm not going to lie.
They sounded right. They sounded great. No doubt over here. Dave, I mean, can he bring in Dorrington, Dave? Can he bring in Donnelly? Can he bring in the youth? Can he incorporate the academy? Can he help fulfill Hill Messi's prophecy?
Yeah, look, I think for me, I said it last night on the show, Jack. You listen to Harry Redknapp and what he spoke about Luka Modric. He moved Luka Modric inside from sort of playing out wide. He moved him into the middle. He was the one that moved him into that role. And everyone at Tottenham, including coaching staff and everything else, told him it's never going to work. But the guy's never come out of there since. He's took to the role like a duck out of water. When you've got these small guys on the wing, and I was there at one stage myself, right? And you're up against guys that are much bigger than you. All you got to do as a fullback is show them on the outside and out-muscle them. It's so easy to defend against. You move Gill into the middle, it's a different proposition. He's got quick feet. He can jink it left or right, and he's got the space to do it. He will draw a lot of free kicks and stuff like that. So for me, that's where I do see Gill playing long-term. I would love to see Arne Slot give the guy a run out in that position. Let's see what he can do. But I think, look, he's got to make a decision on Dane Scarlett, Troy Parrott, White. You've got Spence out on loan.
Yeah.
For me, their decisions he's got to make on them guys. I think he'll probably use a couple. Then you've got Alfie Devine sitting in and around all season training with the first team. Will he come to the fore? You've got Alfie Dorrington. You look at the guy, for me, he looks ready. He's 6 foot plus. He's built. He's good on the football. I mean, no one describes Eric Dyer or Sanchez like that, right? So for me, why not promote him? Maxim Piscotty's been hanging around for quite some time. Over the years, Jack, we've lost too many players across Europe that have refused to sign contracts at Tottenham because they're looking at the shit that's ahead of them and they're like, how am I not getting a chance here? So they're going, do you know what? I'm not signing the contract. I'm going to look after my own career and I'm out. Dennis Serkin, Lavinier, Louis Binks, Noni Madueke, Marcus Edwards, and there's more. There's more.
Potentially a month.
You look at some of them. Noni Madueke, look at the fee he's gone to Chelsea for. Look at the fee that Marcus Edwards probably get bought out of Sporting for. They're big money. So even if they don't work out, we're still actually missing out on recuperating the money that we've put into their development, right? So we're losing that in that regard. But you've also got players who know they're good enough and since has been proven right, and they haven't been given the chance. And that's for a number of reasons. You've had managers that don't really believe in you, but you've also bought so much shit and stockpiled it. There's no pathway for these into the guys because you're trying to put players out there for the shop window. You're trying to put them out there to try and get them going again, and they've ultimately let you down. So for me, the biggest thing Arne Slot is a no thing to do is go down that route again. You've got to axe them, and you've just got to start bringing through these young players. Do not go against what you've known for. Do not go against what has worked for you. You're not going to be able to get some of these guys to be able to do what you want to do. They're in the game too long. They don't have the work rate. They don't want to do the hard work either, and they don't want to sacrifice and suffer like Jose and Conte said about them. No point in persisting with them. Just get some of these younger guys in, young, hungry guys, and get them to do it. And the reason why they will do it, because they want to make a name in the game for themselves. They want a career. You've got other people who are overpaid, spoiled, who've already had their career and think they're living the high life. So it's about time we got some young, hungry players in here to oust them out of the squad and let's move in the right direction. There's plenty around that this guy can work with. And I truly believe that's why they're bringing this guy in here, to stop what's happened in the past, where players are leaving that have been good enough, for our first team or good enough to be given an opportunity. So for me, I think that's what he's been brought in here to do. I think when you look at Tottenham, they actively sort of recruited 25 or under Paratici. Like Matty said, you got the under-17s and the under-18s winning the PL Cup. We got a lot of recruitment over the last few years for the under-21, Sawyers, Ascot or Ashcroft. You've got Lancashire, Susop, Bell. You've brought a load of these players in as well. So for me, what's the point of doing it if there's no vision to get them into the first team if they're good enough? And for me, that's what Arne Slot has to do, and I think that's what he's here to do. Clear the drift and get in young, hungry players.
Can he build that pathway, Matty? Can he give Tyrese Hall a chance? Can he build a pathway for the likes of a Dorrington? This is something that every Spurs fan has spoken about, that it's hard to know whether, we've kind of said, oh, the academy is not good enough. Like, how can we say that when we don't really feel like there's any sort of real way for them to get a chance in the first place? Do you feel like Arne Slot can be given the power, and can he have enough influence to be able to build a pathway for the academy?
It all comes down to Daniel Levy, doesn't it? To what he will allow, what level of control he will try to have over everything. But the track record is there that if Slot is given the opportunity to create that pathway, that success will come from that. And if we're in the Conference League next season, I think it's a brilliant opportunity for a lot of these players to be put in the deep end and play in these really, really important games. I was listening to, I think it might have been Deadline Day in January on Sky Sports, and Tony Pulis was on it, and he was speaking about young players coming through and coming into the first team and all that sort of stuff. And he was speaking about young players when you're playing at the academy, and he said for the vast majority of young players, now maybe it's not the same at Spurs because we are one of the big six clubs in England. Maybe it's not the same, but he was saying with young players playing in the academy, playing in the Premier League 2, under 18 Premier League, whatever it is, you're there to improve. You know, the ultimate reason for being there isn't winning. You know, it's fantastic if you do, and we will celebrate it if they do. But the ultimate goal when you're there is to improve. You know, no one's job depends on whether or not you go out and you beat West Ham on Saturday. No one's job is in trouble if you don't go out and beat Stoke, whoever it is, the next weekend. Whereas when you make that step up to the first team, it's the first time where you feel that pressure, even if it is just the Conference League, and even if the lineup shows clearly that Tottenham aren't going out to win it, they're going out to give young players an opportunity. It's that pressure of knowing that, you know, people have travelled here to watch you play this game. They spent their hard-earned cash. There's a manager whose job might depend on whether or not you get out of the group stage in this game. And the only reason you're there is no one could care less if you don't improve from this game, if you don't learn something in this game. It's about winning. It's winning or nothing. And that pressure isn't something that you can I forget the word. It's not something you can create somewhere else, replicate.
Yeah.
It's either you're in that game and you have that pressure, or you don't have it at all. And that's something that a lot of these Spurs players have been lacking, because really since the last time we were in the Conference League, we haven't really seen, or maybe even the Europa League the season before with Jose, we haven't seen these young players being given a chance. Whereas Slot, I think, is more willing to take that risk to see how the players react in that environment, because there's only so much you can learn about them playing in their youth competitions, which again, they've won a few this season. It's absolutely fantastic. But if they didn't, that wouldn't be the end of the world as it is for the first team. So I think Slot will be willing to take that risk. And I think it would be pointless. It would be a pointless appointment if Daniel Levy is going to tell him, well, you can't do that. You know, you actually need to go out and try and win the Conference League. Levy, if you're going to appoint this manager, needs to just let him do his job. There's a reason you brought him in. There's a reason that he's done well at Feyenoord to the point that you want to bring him to Spurs. If you're going to change what he does and then he's not successful, that's your fault. If you're not going to give him the chance to do what he does, then it's completely pointless. And I think Slot will be willing to take that risk. Whether he'll do it in the Premier League is a very, very different question. Whether I want him to do it in the Premier League is another question as well, because we need to get back on track domestically and finish much higher up the table next season. But if there's any manager that I think will make that step and be able to create that pathway and take those risks, Slot is definitely one of those who are up at the top of the list.
If they're good enough too, right? Like if they're good enough, I think he will give them that chance. You brought up before, Matty, that he knows how to mold players, because he also likes the fact that younger players can be molded and they can sort of play the way or stand in the positions that he wants on the pitch and can be able to perform how he wants them to perform. And they don't exactly have as much pushback as sometimes the older, more experienced players might give him. And so if maybe a Dorrington he sees is good enough, if he thinks a Donnelly is good enough, if he thinks a Tyrese Hall is good enough, or even as well any of the kids that maybe he takes a look at, then I imagine he'll be less reluctant than maybe previous managers to give him a chance. I think he'll have that confidence in them. Of course, he's not going to be chucking them in, I think, against the likes of Chelsea away from home or anything like that. But I think he'd be probably more willing to give them that sort of opportunity, knowing that he's been able to mold players in the past. You even look at the fact that, like you brought up, Matty Kopchu, I believe, came through their academy. Getroida, you said, is also, I believe, from the likes of the Feyenoord academy, or at least as a young player. I think Malacia as well. I think Getroida too is only like 22 is what I wrote down as well. So he's actually still has a long career ahead of him. He brought in a guy from Sweden named Patrick Velamark, who looked like he was really good last season. I'm not sure what's happened to him this season, but again, he's still only 21 and looked like he was doing quite well. Sinistera, he was able to kind of put on the map as well at a young age, and plenty of other players in his time. And also even at AZ Alkmaar, he was able to bring some sort of younger players, on the map. Even there's that Japanese guy who I actually kind of liked. I think it was like Sugawara or whatever his name was. He was able to give a chance from the likes of the J League and, kind of make him a player that looks like he might actually be leaving after this season. And he's been given players a lot of chances to go on to bigger moves and better, moves and, big status, sort of clubs. And that's, also thanks to the fact that Slot has given these younger players opportunities to shine and given these younger players opportunities to become maybe the players that they dreamed of being. Even look at the young, big striker he has right now, Santiago Jimenez, who has only just been there, I think, since they lost their best striker last season in Dessers. I think Dessers was like a more experienced sort of striker that he worked with. And then he then replaced Dessers with a young striker in Jimenez and has gotten great end products. So I have no doubt actually that Slot will be able to have confidence in the kids. It's just which ones he believes can actually perform how he wants them to perform.
Yeah. And I think, look, it's important to stress not every single kid is going to come through the academy. It's just not going to happen, right? But there are players within them groups that are good enough to progress. And you just got to weigh it up. We're at a point, right? What have you got to lose by, playing some of these guys in early rounds of the Cups? I grew up in an era where, you had a mix of youngsters with players coming back from injuries and players on the periphery of the team that were all hungry, that wanted to make the first team. And you could get away with doing it, but you just got to simply weigh it up. Do you want to be playing a full international on over 50 grand a week that's making mistakes and embarrassing this football club, who cannot deal with the pressures of playing against Ennis Mora, Vitesse, Sheffield United and people like that away from home? You look at all our cup exits, being full internationals out there, over 50 grand a week, can't handle the pressure. In fact, you actually had one come out and blame the crowd. I'm sorry, Winks, we forgot to send a memo to ask the home crowd to be quiet for you guys to be able to perform. Right? But, would you rather give a couple of the academy guys a go that aren't costing you too much money? I know where I would rather go to right now. I'm sick of some guys being rolled out there just to let us down, who are not hungry enough for the opportunity. What are they learning? They can't deal with the pressures. So for me, why not give it to a young lad? Let's see what he can do. Let's see if he can deal with the pressures. It can't be any worse. Plus, you've got guys who are actively costing the club. Not only are we paying them their weekly wage to go out there and do that shit to us, we're also paying them their appearance fee, by the way. Plus, we're losing revenue from not going deeper into these cup competitions. So they're just costing the club at all opportunities right now. So why not give it to a youngster on low wages, probably doesn't get an appearance fee, but is young and hungry and actually wants to help us get through to the next round? So for me, that's it. It's simple. Arne Slot has to weigh that up. And we are now at that time. We have to go down that route. Eric Dyer, for instance, spoke about last night, paid $4 million. We've rinsed every single part of that out of him. Now he's actually costing us with the mistakes he's making because it's costing us prize money. So he's actually costing us more, in terms of money and stuff like that. They're holding the club back. So now is the time. Get rid of them and start bringing through some youngsters. Give them the opportunity. What have you got to lose? Can't be any worse. Can't be.
Kind of last question from me here, Maddie, in terms of, kind of Slot's tactics and also personnel. We were just speaking about younger players. Do you feel like there are certain players that maybe are in the squad right now, maybe even starters, players that we sort of have full confidence in that you actually think might surprisingly struggle under Arne Slot? Maybe Højbjerg or an Emerson, somebody that we have a lot, who knows, a Romero, it could be somebody. Could there be someone that might actually end up being exiled or, shown the door by Slot unexpectedly?
It's not a player that I think we necessarily trust or is one of the best in the squad, but I think Pedro Porro, I'm not sure there's a place for him in an Arne Slot team. Now, I did a tactical analysis and I kind of looked at a few adjustments that could be made to allow him into that team. But for me, Emerson is a better option for this team than Pedro Porro. I think Højbjerg in the team that I was looking at next season, I didn't have him in it. I would have put Basuma in beside Bentancur. I'd preferably get a new centre back, but from what we have at the moment, I think Basuma suits that role better than Højbjerg. And of course Bentancur is going to be in there. He's the best midfielder we have. Kulusevski, I think fits this team. How much he likes to have the ball, whether it's out wide or in narrow. Under Slot, we're going to be a lot more possession based, and of course that's where Kulusevski does his best. The pressing side of things, and David, you made the point a while ago about whether or not Kane or Son would be able to be involved in that intense press. I think one thing that would really help them is Slot's pressing system. Again, another similarity to Julian Nagelsmann. It seems to be much more that they work smart instead of working hard. With Uli Nagelsmann, he uses this thing what's called basically minimum width, so that they keep the pitch as narrow as possible. So essentially, you've less distance to run when you're going to press someone. And what Arne Slot likes to do when they're in possession, he has the idea of what they need to do if they do lose the ball. And when they're building up in possession at the time, they often get into a 3-2-4-1 formation. And what they tend to do is, when you're out of possession, you mark someone. So let's imagine it's Son on the left-hand side. He comes into that kind of half space. He'll essentially be marking their right centre mid. So he'll have enough space that he's able to receive the ball. But if there's a turnover in possession, if Longley plays a bad pass on the left-hand side, Son is on the right centre mid. Kulusevski will be on the left back. Emerson will be on what. So he has everything is prepared for losing the ball, and you don't have to run 50, 60 yards to press the centre back here. A lot of the players are kind of already in that position, ready to press, so they're not using up too much energy to do that press. So I think they might be able to adapt to that. But if I did have to pick one player that I think would struggle in a Slot system, it's Pedro Porro, unfortunately.
Whoa, interesting.
Yeah.
Good call, maybe.
Do you not think he could be converted to a right winger though, Matty?
Look, it's definitely where he does best. He's best with the ball at his feet and running at an opposition player. I think as a right back, right wing back, whatever he is, a lot of the time when he has the ball, he's able to run into space and before he meets someone, basically. Whereas if he's playing in right wing, he's going to be constantly marked. There's going to be someone tied on him all the time. That's not something he's had to deal with before. So he might have the potential to adapt to that and become someone who can deal with that a little bit better. But I think if we were going to put Pedro Porro right wing against Leeds at the weekend, I think he'd struggle. Well, I suppose it's Leeds, he might not, but it's not. I don't think it's a change that could be made straight away. But again, I do think there are some tweaks that could be made to an Arne Slot system. Basically, like where one side they always have an inverted fullback, and the other side the fullback stays a little bit wider. It could be that if we focus our play down the left-hand side, Adoji stays out wide on the left, where you would expect Porro, or if it is Emerson, to come in narrow. Just let Kulusevski come into that space because he operates very, very well there, and he sees himself more as a central player than he does as a wide player. So let Kulusevski come in and occupy that space and allow the width to be held by Pedro Porro. What that might mean for the defensive transition, I'll leave that to Slot to figure out. There's definitely tweaks that could be made, though, for sure.
I'm curious, what with Pedro Porro. I think you made some good points there, and it's probably something to definitely think about. He was able to work with that guy Johan Bash, that former Brighton player. That guy was useless, so he maybe could be able to work with a Pedro Porro, but poor guy had to work with him. But
Johan Bash scored an incredible bicycle kick against Chelsea one time. I think
he's actually good in the Eredivisie. To be fair to him, he's actually quite good when he's in the Dutch league. But he's at Brighton.
True.
So is Janssen, what did you make of the answer that Matt gave? He said Pedro Porro could be one that might struggle. Do you see another player that could maybe struggle or maybe unexpectedly not do well in Slot's system?
I'll agree with Højbjerg to a certain degree. I think, in terms of on the ball, if in a possession-based team, Højbjerg needs to be able to move that ball quickly. Arne Slot likes it to be moved quickly. I think Højbjerg will have to work on that side of the game a little. Under pressure when he's making them passes, sometimes it gets a bit sloppy, a bit erratic. So I definitely think, that's something he needs to work on, but I'm not writing him out. Every team needs someone that wants to get stuck in, needs someone to do the work rate behind all the talented players. So I'm not overruling that. I hear what Matty's saying on Pedro Porro, I do. But for me, I think he's got to work with him. You can't spend the amount of money that we spent on him in January and he's out of the team in the summer. It's going to be absolutely uproar. The owners will get caned left, right, and centre for it. It's like if you knew you were going to sack Antonio Conte or he wasn't signing the contracts, which they knew because that they were told over the World Cup and stuff like that, then they shouldn't have sanctioned that money on that position at that time. So I think you'll have to work with Pedro Porro.
Is that not a bad way to start, though? If you're saying to Slot, well, we paid a lot of money for him, so you have to use him. Would you not rather give him that kind of freedom to make the call either way?
I hear you. I hear you. But for me, I think Pedro Porro technically is good enough to play in an Arne Slot team. I really do. It's not like we're axing him because he's like Dyer or Sanchez. He can't control the ball, can't pass the ball, can't do anything. I think Pedro Porro is technically good enough to
Got a
play.
good shot on him as well, I think.
Yeah. And I think he'll surprise him. I think he'll surprise Arne Slot, if you want me to be brutally honest. I think Destiny Udogie I worry about. Left wing back, he's played at Udinese. No one knows what he's going to be like at left back. And if he doesn't work out, you've got no other cover there that's good enough. So for me, it'd be interesting to see if Destiny Udogie can, play that left back role. That's an uncertainty. That's an unknown for us right now. So for me, that's maybe one that I'd be looking at or questioning. Can he come in and do the business in an Arne Slot team? Now, look, he's 22, full of energy, decent enough on the ball, quick. He has all the attributes necessary to be able to succeed. But is he defensively good enough in the Premier League to play a left back role? That's the unknown.
All the things you mentioned with Højbjerg, I would think of with Skip. So the fact that Skip struggles to move the ball quickly, Skip struggles to have a great first touch. He struggles to be able to carry the ball. Yeah. Like he carries the ball well, but then in other moments, then he'll kick it 20 yards in front of him for no reason. And then you just get a bit worried that in, like you said, a possession-based system, when Skip is going to be asked to break teams down, like, can he actually do that? I don't think he can by the looks of things. So I actually say Skip would be a one that would potentially struggle heavily.
Yeah, I agree.
I think it's a very poignant analysis of our recruitment team that we're looking at positions that would struggle. Over the last 5 years, we've signed Perisic, Sessegnon, Udogie, Porro, Emerson, Spence, Aurier, and we're still saying, well, our fullbacks aren't good enough. And in the midfield, we've signed. GDP. It's exactly. These are positions that we've invested in the most, and they're still the areas that we're looking at as the problem areas. It's terrifying.
Crazy. It's crazy. Well, Matty, why don't you tell people where to find you? I'm pretty sure everyone's already seen it anyway, but, tell them what they need to tune in for on the channel, my man.
Yeah, my channel is the creatively named Matt Hayes Tottenham blog. The majority of my content is transfer stuff, but before we do get into that, I'm looking in depth at the managerial search, and I did a video. It was almost 2 weeks ago at this point, looking at Arne Slot, a very in-depth look at his career so far, tactically what he could do at Spurs, and I used a bit of a tactic board and some graphics to fully show what I'm talking about. And instead of looking at his tactics at his former clubs, I looked at how his tactics could work at Spurs. We also looked at his philosophies as a manager, looking at some testimonies from people he's worked with, players that have played for him, and as well going a bit more in depth on the young players that he managed to bring into that Feyenoord and Alkmaar team. So I'd appreciate any support in that. It's been viewed over 23,000 times already, which I did not expect one bit, which is pretty cool. Anyone on Twitter as well, you can find me at Matt Hayes THFC.
And do get over, check out that video. We sort of brought Matty here today to sort of, give us the lowdown on Arne Slot and stuff like that, and have a good conversation with myself and Jack. But if you want more of what Matty has said on Arne Slot, please do get over and check out that video on Matty Hayes Tottenham blogs. So make sure you get over there and check that out. Jack, anything you want to say to the Harris Army before we end off?
No, everybody, just keep the faith in the Slotness monster. Hopefully Rafael Pimenta can negotiate a good deal for the likes of Feyenoord, because we don't want to screw them over too much, because we might want to take some of their players with us as well. And also the likes of Arne Slot maybe can be happy too. Also Matty Hayes' channel, if like Dave said, it will be pinned in the description and in the comments down below for all of you guys. Also leave, a comment thanking Matty for giving up his time, as well as just having a good, productive conversation with us. I really enjoyed this one. So everybody leave a like as well if you can, but we will be seeing you. Come on, you Spurs. Potentially in the Slotness we trust. We'll see you.